Okay, everybody comfortable? Cell phones off, right? Okay, here we go.
Welcome once again to Quick Considerations. This is the podcast proper's kind of mini cast, quick reviews when we walk out of the theater kind of thing. We've done a few of these before, previously done them with a number of guests, but like our last time doing this, I've got you know him, you love him, my co-host, the esteemed Dustin Friesenhan, Esquire.
The third senior Dr. MD. I don't know.
So Dustin and I have just come out of watching the brand new Evil Dead film, Evil Dead Rise, and we figured we would just do a quick
little discussion about what we think. First impressions. Not long enough to get to the fridge logic necessarily. The fridge is still far away.
And like I said, we've literally just walked out of the theater and sat down in the car, which probably explains the off-the-cuff scattered nature of the discussion so far. Basically, the format of these episodes, I'm going to do a quick synopsis of the film, spoiler-free. Then we're going to give quick impressions of whether we like the film or not. And then we're going to do a quick little spoilery discussion about some of the more germane details to the film that we enjoyed or did not enjoy. So
getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Gives you a place to piece out if you need to. So Evil Dead Rise is a 2023 film written and directed by Lee Cronin, executive produced by Bruce Campbell, Rob Tapert, Sam Raimi, all the original folks kind of back together, Lee Cronin being the new addition to the franchise. The basic plot of the film is essentially a family in an LA apartment building that is condemned. They run afoul of the Book of the Dead, and the usual Evil Dead shenanigans sort of play out. I mean, if you've seen an Evil Dead movie in the past, then you kind of know what you're in for. Other than the change of scenery, this one being an urban setting rather than in the cabin in the woods, which the previous, well, three of the previous were, I suppose, Army of Darkness, and anything but a cabin in the woods.
I don't think cabins were invented yet at that point.
Very likely. Dustin, just a quick impression. What did you think of the film?
My first impression is that I do actually prefer Fede Alvarez's version. I feel that one was a bit darker. Going into it, you actually compared this to Dead Alive, depending on where you see the film. And so I was expecting a lot more gore than actually was in the film. What other thoughts that I had were that it's really darkly shot. And I've actually worked in apartment buildings that had lighting that was this poor, but often enough inside the houses people got decent enough LEDs because it wasn't some cheap slumlord who was trying to save a couple bucks. Man, when they lit the place up with candles, it was basically exactly the same lighting. Get a new lamp, people. I know you're moving, but still.
But did you enjoy the film?
I did enjoy the film. There's a lot of stuff in there that I thought was rather interesting and that I found sort of kept it a bit more fresh. Yeah, as you said, the scenery is definitely different, it being in an apartment building. The fact that you had a number of children who were there, that's always something that's usually going to get people's little squick buttons pressed.
Yeah, usually it's teenagers or adults, and this brought some kids into the mix, which really did jack up the stakes.
And I thought the kids actually acted well, especially Cassie.
I have to agree with you. I genuinely enjoyed the movie. I thought I was going to enjoy it a little bit more based on some reviews that I heard. One of the reviews, Dustin commented on the Dead Alive / Brain Dead. That was a comment that I had run across, and somebody had said basically if you liked that film, you would probably like this film. I'm guessing he was making a reference to something that we won't discuss at the moment. But I think I also probably prefer Fede Alvarez's version for reasons I'll get into momentarily. But as far as just like an installment in the Evil Dead franchise, it's solid and I like it. And if you're thinking about going and seeing it in the theater, it's definitely worth the price of admission.
I'm trying to think of what what film I would compare to as being a combination of Evil Dead and X film. I feel like there's something that's sort of on the tip of my tongue that I just can't quite get, you know?
I did think that in a weird way, like Fetty's version was way more brutal and it was way more intense. This one played a little bit more with the psychological horror. I kind of wonder, I honestly, I knew nothing about this film going in.
All I had was the poster as well.
Yeah, exactly. And just like the family is forever or whatever the tagline is. And essentially, I kind of wonder if Lee Cronin had to sort of dial back some of the sort of brutality that you sort of expect from an Evil Dead film because there were kids involved and they had to play a little bit more with the psychological horror, or if they were just...
I don't see that, to be honest, because a lot of the most brutal things were things seen by the kids.
This is true.
Especially the youngest.
I do
They are
think...
going to be traumatized for life.
I do think that the urban setting was very interesting. It was... kind of reminded me a little bit of Scream 6. As much as I enjoyed Scream 6, I think I'm going to have to sort of sit with it for a little bit just because the change of the setting to New York City and some of the way that they have to kind of reimagine the gags and the way things sort of play out. You kind of had to do that here as well. You know, there's certain things that you have to set up. Like it can't just be a full apartment building.
Which is why I was condemned to minimize the amount of people.
Exactly. And, you know, I mean, the condemned thing also fits the setting because the whole thing is about evil taking over and destroying innocence and all that sort of thing.
One of the things that I felt that they tried to set up, though, but didn't really have the payoff, is the whole notion of family, because you have the sister who you learn right off the bat is pregnant, going to meet her other sister, and there's a lot of togetherness when the first is possessed, says, "Don't let it get my kids." And I feel like it was building up to something more than it ended up being. Just sort of a, "Oh, you're going to be a mom?" Yes, that's it. And like that's, it didn't feel like it was enough. It felt like I was expecting something that didn't quite happen.
See, that's funny because you say that you didn't feel you got the payoff of that, whereas I kind of felt that I got enough, whereas I thought that the brutality was sort of pulled back because of the kids, and you're like, no, I think the brutality was there.
Well, it wasn't as brutal as Fede Alvarez, for sure, but I think that was more just not necessarily what happened to people, just how it was shown.
Yeah.
Because the stoner guy from the first one, I am terrible with names, obviously. He gets the whole nail gun through the hand and the slash through it, and just the way they show it, the blood is more of the solid sort of realistic blood, whereas here, yeah, there's a lot of blood, but a lot of it feels a lot more of the dead alive, red colored water sort of thing.
It is an interesting sort of balancing of tones because it is so extreme that it's almost comical in some sense, but they aren't going for that slapsticky vibe that, you know, the Three Stooges stuff that you got in Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and even to some degree Evil Dead from Fede Alvarez.
Here, it felt a bit more jokey, as you said, a bit more akin to Ash versus the Evil Dead, where yes, it's brutal, yes, it's bloody, but the tone isn't quite as dark.
It's that intensity. It lacks the intensity of the Fede Alvarez film.
But based off of some of the things that do occur, I'd say it's more a matter of framing and direction and lighting that's creating that brutality, maybe the Foley effects.
And I do think there is a legitimate, you know, there's a family. We've kind of become accustomed since the late 70s to just picking off teenagers, you know, like we're playing a game of Duck Hunt. The Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, your prom nights, your, you know, whatever, all the slashers. Like it's basically just let's set up some teenagers and knock them down. And I mentioned Scream. Scream is another one. Whereas this one is legitimately like, we're going to really put this family unit to the test. And in some ways, that kind of makes it more intense.
I gotta say, though, watching it, the Deadites are having the most fun in the world. They are just loving every minute of it. And I feel like A lot of the times that the Deadites lose, it feels almost like they're just losing on purpose because there's no reason why they should fail. Though in the tape when he says that they're sort of an embodiment of chaos, I could feel like they'd almost purposefully do stuff incorrectly just to give people hope, or just because they don't care if they win or lose. They're just fucking around until whatever happens, happens. And I sort of get that feeling, which I can appreciate. Whereas you look at Fede Alvarez's, and it feels like it was trying to win a bit more.
True. And there was the whole thing about that ultimate being sort of coming up at the end, which is what they were sort of trying to stop. I'm gonna flag that we're gonna cruise into spoiler territory now, just because I think we've flown really close to the tower already, and this way we can just kind of say some stuff straight out. So if you haven't seen the film and you're listening to this for some reason, time to turn us off, or if you don't care, keep going. And if you have seen the film, let us carry on. The Deadite thing, I think because it wasn't just that constant pressure being put on that you got in the Fede Alvarez version, and to some degree Evil Dead 2, I think the Deadites are allowed to play a little bit more. I think the Deadites are allowed to really get into the sort of psychological torture, and they make it very clear that once the soul is, once the person is possessed, there is no saving that person. There is no resurrection or exorcism. So it's...
Even though that happened to Ash in the second one, he manages to escape and find his way out.
But that was the sunlight, was it not?
I actually haven't seen the second one in
because
well over
it was all about Dead by Dawn, right? And he survives until the dawn. But then, or no, that was the end of the first one, was it not? Oh man, I got to revisit these movies.
Well, the second one is essentially the same plot as the first one, except Ash is possessed
in
the second one.
Okay, so Evil Dead is where he gets basically he survives to the dawn, but then
at the end you have the Sam Raimi shot going right up into him, and that's how it ends.
And then Evil Dead 2 basically starts with him being picked up by, he gets possessed, dropped into the pool, he looks up at the sun and kind of gets purged of the evil. And then he has to make his way back to the cabin to get the car, tries to drive, but the bridge is out. He ends up back at the cabin, and then those other people come. And then at the end of Evil Dead 2, he gets sucked through the vortex, which lands him in medieval England.
He also had to cut off his hand, and that was part of the purging, it seems.
Yeah, but I think that's why Ash never got, permanently possessed. But this very much was we're Deadites, we're evil, and we're going to kind of fuck around with your head.
I've always appreciated that. They go deep. They know everything about the other person, which is why anytime you try to hide from a Deadite, it always seems ridiculous to me. It's like they know your most inner thoughts at all times, your fears, everything that terrifies you, and they're using that. They know where you are. There's no hiding.
They're basically just going to wait you out.
Which is funny because they want to kill you by dawn, but they also have to get their 8 hours in. Otherwise, they're not going to get their full pay. They're paid hourly.
So, going to touch again on the whole Dead Alive thing. So there's a big Shining kind of ending, which I'm pretty sure is a direct homage to The Shining. And then we get this wood chipper kind of scene where we kill sort of the big bad. I kind of dig the big bad. And then that's what I think is the lawnmower going into the zombies comparison that guy was making.
Though I did think in both of those scenes, number one, elevator full of blood, if that were to drop, that could actually cushion you so that you'd survive.
If you're in the fluid, I was thinking that too.
Exactly, that makes perfect sense. And number two, with the wood chipper, the only other two movies I remember with a wood chipper, Fargo being one, and the one with the hillbillies.
Girls Have Eyes?
No, versus...
Beverly Hillbillies?
No. Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh, that's right,
Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Bodies they got caught in the wood chipper. They didn't just get sucked right in. So that was my thought there, hey, what would actually happen?
But they do that whole thing where they tear her open and they kind of merge with her, so we don't know what's going on bone-wise.
Well, she's all messed up. Those two are okay.
We didn't see a lot of bones going on.
They definitely hit it well enough that you never saw the issues with any of the effects there.
How did you feel about... I never picked up on the shotgun. I was waiting for her to say, "Come get some," the entire movie. Then there's the shotgun. There's the come get some. Then there's a chainsaw.
I thought they did the homages pretty well. You had the Raimi shot at the very beginning, which ended up being a drone. I thought that was actually very cute. That was nice and clever. Because you see so many of these Raimi shots. It's nice to see it done slightly differently.
Oh man, the eyeball flying into the guy's mouth? Like, that's straight out of Evil Dead 2. Because there's like the crazy eye gag where the person gets hammered in the head and the eye pops out and it goes in the person's mouth. That was just a crazy callback as well.
Lots of good callbacks in this one.
So you weren't put off by the callbacks. You enjoyed them.
I thought they were done well. I thought they sort of fit. And going back to torturing the family, they specifically wanted to torture that family because when the side characters came by, they were all just killed outright, like within seconds. They were just left out in the hallway, all during one shot. And I thought that the shot through the peephole was a very great shot. That was a very well done
That was
section.
super good. And then the way the mom comes up at the end and like looks into the peephole again,
She's got a good creepy smile.
It was
I really
effective.
appreciate that.
It was very effective. The callbacks didn't all work for me. I think when the chainsaw showed up, that was maybe
a bit too much.
A bit too much, especially because she said, "Come get some." Then I started very much thinking of Ash vibes.
The come get some, I think, could be too much.
I was
thinking that I should have seen the chainsaw coming because there was the business. The guy has a tree cutting business and has got his thing parked down there in the basement.
Everything is literally set up in like the first, 15 minutes or so. Once you get past kind of like the crazy cabin in the woods opening. But I also wanted to talk about the coda to the film, which ties in directly to the opening of the film. I've heard some people argue that this movie went on about 5 minutes too long and that it should have just basically ended with Cassie and Beth. Oh my God, was that her name? Beth? Yeah, Bethy. That they should have just walked away and that would have kind of been the end of it. And then, bah, Evil Dead Rise.
But then how would you explain the whole intro sequence? All of that would have been a waste, so you would have had to cut that out as well.
Yeah, I think the idea would be like cut out the first 5 minutes and cut out the last 5 minutes. So maybe cut out 10 minutes of the movie. I didn't mind it, and clearly they wanted to set up that the dead are out in the world, or the Deadites are out in the world. They also made a comment when he's doing the recording that the priest says it's one of 3 known books of the dead. So not only is what's going on like in the cabin in the woods going on, but there's technically other books out there. So they just opened the world up.
Though I can say that they've got 2 books in America. America seems like a shitty place to be in terms of the Deadites. I don't know why everyone keeps bringing it to the States.
To be fair, this film was shot in Australia with an Australian crew, so that's where they shoot like most of these things now, because they built up their crews on Xena and Hercules and Spartacus, I think. So now they go back to do these all the time because they know the people there. That's where Ash vs. Evil Dead was shot too.
And now you know. And now I know.
So you're okay? You're okay with the prologue and the epilogue?
I am. I feel it opens up the world, makes it a bit less confined to just the apartment building. Because it felt, if I think if you were to take out the beginning and the end there, it would feel a little incomplete.
I agree. And honestly, if there's one thing we've learned over the course of all of these movies and shows and stuff, is that the Evil Dead is not just like one entity that possesses one person and then it spreads and infects or whatever. Like the fact that when that young woman comes down into the parkade and gets attacked, like that's legit. And it also might be the argument for why Beth and Cassie were able to get away, because there was still somebody in the building that the dead could take.
Though to talk about that a little bit, as you said, the sunlight is what saved Ash. She was possessed at the beginning.
Touché.
During the day, at which point she apparently, while possessed by the Deadite, picked up her friend and drove out to a cabin in the woods where she then laid down sick. After hanging out a little bit and getting some medication from her then meathead boyfriend, who I do appreciate that he dove into the lake to save her. Regardless of all else that was going on, his first instinct was to dive in and save her. So
that is fair.
Points for that.
So if we're gonna like no prize this, I would either say that we know that the Deadites like to fuck with people, so Maybe it was like, okay, I need to actually travel and find more people.
I'm going to get some more victims.
I'm going to get some more victims. And she had that big floppy sun hat and the sunglasses. So maybe.
Except you're in a city. There's so many more victims around you at this point.
I know. And then
but also going to the recordings, the guy in the recordings was talking about doing his experiments and how he trapped himself in the basement, which is sort of reflective of the cabin in the woods. Is this that same Liberis Mortis? And if so, how did it get into this basement, which isn't as condemned thing? Like, if that is a callback to the cabin in the woods, as opposed to a completely separate cabin in the woods that somebody happened to lock himself into the basement of, they seem to have one modus operandi when it comes to dealing with these evil dead, of which this single priest was somehow able to take out however many were there with him.
I'm pretty confident that was a completely separate thing, because it's this priest. Actually, that's not entirely removed from Dead Alive either, because the guy goes to like another land and he gets whatever, the monkey, and then he brings back the infection and whatever. Anyways, so the Necronomiconics Mortis was that professor, and he made that recording, and that was all taking place in the original trilogy. This was these three priests who'd gotten this book from somewhere and brought it back to LA, and that was all happening in LA. And then after all of that transpired, he locked everything down in that vault. So I'm going to say that those are two completely separate things.
Makes me wonder, though, is there going to be a third trilogy which follows the third book?
I think if they can keep doing these, they're just going to they've opened the world. They've completely opened the world. I also just want to point out, because I have to finish the thought, my other no prize suggestion is that perhaps Ash wasn't purged of the Deadites when the sun came out and it was the dawn. Maybe they knew the bridge was out and he'd have to go back to the cabin, and this was just a way where they're like, we're going to give him some hope, and then we're going to fuck with him again. Just a theory.
Which, I mean, works temporarily, but doesn't work when it comes to the fact that Ash was around for 30 years after that.
I'm not going to put too much thought into it.
Though you guys can all feel free to put some thought into it and argue about the mechanics of the Deadites in the comment section.
We'd love to hear what you all have to say about it. Clearly, Dustin and I both very happy with this movie. Definitely going to watch it again. Most likely going to pick it up on physical media when it comes out. And if there's one thing you can count on, it's that an Evil Dead movie is going to come out on physical media 3-4 times. So hit us up on all the social media, like, share, follow, and subscribe to all of the relevant platforms. And, if there's an opportunity to rate and review, please do that as well. Helps with the algorithms and helps get the show into the eyes and ears of people who may not know we are out there. So that brings another episode of Quick Considerations to a close. This is probably going to get released. We have so many episodes sort of up in the air right now, and we were on a hiatus, and we're kind of coming back, but there's no real schedule, so it's all chaos. And we actually have like a primer episode where we kind of explain that this is all happening because of, like, we have fail-safe time machines and we're moving around, which I'm subscribing to and putting out there again.
And for anyone who's just going through our back catalog and finding this, ignore this completely. It's irrelevant to you.
Or is it? Anyways, just in case you are listening to the show in real time, it's kind of chaotic right now, and episodes are just going to be sort of dropping as they drop. And this is just sort of a heads up that there's really no rhyme or reason to what's happening right now. So
who knows what's coming next?
But thank you so much for checking us out and giving us a download or stream. We hope that you all stay safe and healthy, and will join myself, Mike Josic,
and myself, Dustin Friesman,
on another episode of For Your Consideration, or All Things Considered, or the next
considerations, or In Case You Were Considering, or one of our many sister shows.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Ta-ta.